Like most of us, Christina Schneider, also known as the daring English teacher, didn't find teaching writing one bit easy at first. Despite her background as a journalist, putting all the puzzle pieces together in the classroom to help her students understand how to build a thesis, introduce and analyze evidence, and express their ideas felt like a pretty tough task. But over the years, she's had one breakthrough after another. Now she steps up to the plate each year with her new students, feeling confident that she can take them where they need to go. She's recently written a new book, Building Strong Writers, where she shares everything she's learned in step-by-step walkthroughs to make it easy for you to try too. Today on the pod, we're going to dive into 3 of her top writing scaffolds and how you can get started with them tomorrow to make writing instruction simpler and more successful in your classroom. Welcome to the Spark Creativity Teacher Podcast, a podcast for English teachers looking for more. More creativity, more engagement, more joy, and no more scripted curriculum, lesson planning ruts, or boring book lists. I'm Betsy Potash, and I'm honored you're trusting me to help. You're not alone on this creative journey anymore. Well, welcome back to the show for the second time, Christina. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you so much, Betsy, for having me on today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's been so fun over the last few weeks looking at your new book, Building Strong Writers. I wanted to say congratulations right away.
Thank you so much.
I'm excited to dive into some of your favorite strategies for scaffolding writing because I feel like this is something as English teachers we can just almost never talk about enough. It's like on our minds all the time. Everybody is trying to figure out what is the best way to get my students to understand this? So having you bring your experience as a truly veteran teacher who has also worked in the writing field, it's just really helpful. So we're going to dive into 3 of your favorite strategies. And I thought we could start with one that I truly believe applies to almost every writing classroom, and that is sentence frames and sentence starters. This is something that I didn't know about when I first began teaching, and over the years I've seen that it can be so helpful to students who are struggling. So let's dive in. Can you tell us more about sentence frames and sentence starters and how you use them with your high schoolers?
Yes, absolutely. And I agree with you about not knowing about sentence frames when I started teaching as well. However, I quickly realized that students needed structure and support, especially as they're learning to write academically. And so that's where the sentence frames and sentence starters really came in. And so once I started using them, they became a staple in my instruction in the high school English classroom. So they're my favorite strategy because they help students learn how to write academically. So often, it's not that our students don't know what to say. They have ideas, but it's that they don't know how to say it. They're not sure how to formulate their thoughts into a cohesive statement and transfer that to paper. So rather than have students sit at their desks not knowing what to do or what to write and just sit there because they have writer's block, the sentence frames really guide the students and help them organize their ideas and transfer them from their brain to the paper. So I use this strategy, and I use it especially toward the beginning of the school year. So essentially, a sentence frame is like a fill in the blank type of support for students, where the structure and organization and academic language is already there, but the students fill in the crucial details, essentially what they are writing, with their own thoughts. And eventually, what we want to do is scale back and take away some of the structure. But the ultimate goal eventually is to have all of that taken back and that scaffolds and students are able to write academically on their own.
Perfect. Can you maybe give us an example of a sentence frame or a sentence starter just so people kind of have it in their mind when you're working with academic writing?
Yeah, definitely. So for maybe like literary analysis, if we're working on a short story, what I'll have the students do is I'll have the beginning of the prompt for them. I might start out by saying something like, in the short story, The Wife's Story by Ursula K. Le Guin, and then I'll have a blank. And this is where students are going to talk about maybe what's going on or what devices the author uses. And then I'll have a little bit more later on that says which enhances the author's, and then I'll have another blank. And then they'll fill in what does it enhance? Maybe the message or the theme or the tone of the short story.
Yeah, that's so helpful for kids when they're just feeling like, blank cursor. It just gives them like a really clear first step, which seems so helpful at the start of the year. And then do you kind of phase out the complexity of what you offer so that they're just doing more and more of it themselves?
Yes, definitely. So eventually, the full part of the sentence frame is kind of removed, and it turns into I'm just giving them the sentence starters. And as we go through that process, another really great strategy is to brainstorm other ways to say or to write that sentence starter so that you're giving students a big variety of different sentence starters that they can use. So they're not always using your language, but then they're learning how to incorporate the general idea of what you're trying to say, but in their own words.
Yeah, that's so helpful. Do you have them just kind of keep sentence starter brainstorms like that in a certain place in their notebook so they can always be looking back?
Yeah, definitely. So we'll take writing notes before we have a writing assignment, and I'll give them a few different like sentence frames and then a
Mm.
few different sentence starters. And during the instruction, I'll have them just in a very informal setting. Let's brainstorm other strong verbs that we can say. The author emphasizes, the author stresses, the author illustrates, the author conveys. So they have almost like these word banks that they can pull and choose from so that they don't always say, the author says over and over again.
Yeah, yeah, that's really helpful. It reminds me of advice that I've often heard, which is like make the invisible rules visible. Like the academic language like that feels so embedded in our discipline that sometimes it just seems automatic. Like for me, some of those verbs are just so baked into my mind that it's easy for me to forget that I had to first learn them a long time ago. And so giving students just such clarity about the kind of language that can make them successful, that seems so helpful.
Yes, definitely. That way they slowly build their academic language, which eventually gives them more confidence in their writing.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's talk about the next item on our agenda, which is color coding. Now, I'm a sucker for color, for visual learning. I really liked reading about this. So, tell us about this color coding as a writing scaffold. How does this help students build their writing skill?
One of the biggest benefits I've seen with color coding is that it really slows the students down and it makes them focus on the intentionality of what they are writing. Because so often we'll give our students a writing assignment or a writing prompt and they just go with it without the organization, without thinking about all of the structure, without thinking of those, coded academic phrases and terms that they need to have in their writing. And so I've found that by incorporating color coding into our writing, it really makes them focus on what they are writing and it helps improve their writing as well. So I use color coding mainly for two big parts of the writing. The first one would be general organization. And so if we're doing, your standard 5 paragraph essay, I'll say body paragraph number 1 is red, body paragraph number 2 is blue, and body paragraph number 3 is green. And I'll even have them draw boxes on their brainstorming and color code them with the red, blue, and green to organize their thoughts. And then that even goes then to the thesis statement instruction. I'll have them look at the prompt again and answer the prompt and underline it. That way they know they are answering the prompt and then give their 3 like general overview ideas that will lead into each body paragraph. So I'll have them put red first because that was the color that we assigned to body paragraph number 1, and then blue and then green in their thesis statement. And then it's a good way for them to visually see the organization of their essay. And so that's the first way that I use color coding. The second way that I use color coding is for embedding evidence. I found that there's this jump that happens between like fourth and fifth grade to sixth grade and then to high school. And at the younger ages, the kids learn to say, the text says,
Mm.
but they
The
become
quote
so,
says.
yes, the quote says, as in the text.
Yeah.
And I know this because I'm seeing my own kids do it.
Yeah.
And in reality, at that age, there's nothing wrong with it. They're learning like baby steps for how to embed evidence. But then I feel a lot of high schoolers get kind of complacent and they're like, oh, well, I already know how to do this. I'm just going to say the text says. And it's like, no, we have to build on that now. That worked then, but now we're going to make your writing more academic. And so for color coding, I'll have a certain color for a general transition. I want them to indicate to the audience that they're going to give evidence. So maybe they say something like, for instance, or to illustrate, and then they'll have a comma. And
Mm.
then I want some context, what's going on in the story. If you're writing about a short story or a novel, what just happened? What are the characters doing? What's the general idea that's going on? Or if it's nonfiction, maybe what's the rhetorical situation? When was this speech given? Something like that. So they'll have a separate color for the context.
Mm.
And then I want to know the author. Who said this? If it's literature, was it the narrator? Was it the author as the narrator, or was it a character who directly said the quote? And then a strong verb, once again, building that academic language bank. So, what did the character do? What did the person do? Did they say it? Did they exclaim it? And then the quote, and then the citation. So, each of those elements would have a different color. And so, oftentimes when we're writing in class, they'll be like, oh, can you look at this? Can you see if it's good? And immediately I can just check, do you have every color? Okay, you do. Now I can check and see if it's there. And for that one sentence, that embedding evidence sentence, giving each element a different color, it really forces the students to focus on making sure that they craft that sentence well.
Yeah. One of the hardest sentences for every student to write.
It is. But I feel like once they get it, once they get that sentence, their writing just takes off because that's kind of the cornerstone for writing. If they can explain what's going on, but once they get that evidence embedded and it sounds like it's coming from them,
Hmm.
we see a lot of growth.
Oh, that's so great. I can also picture like how teachers could use this strategy in many ways beyond argumentative writing too. Like it seems really helpful in these two instances. And I can also imagine having kids color code like all the times they use certain types of poetic language that you're working on, in a poetry slam piece, or they could be highlighting in certain colors different types of sensory details in a more narrative piece. Just like it has a lot of options for the writing palette.
Yeah, it's definitely a very universally applied strategy. Whenever you have multiple components that you are asking students to put together, assign a different color to each component. And it's a really quick way just to quickly assess, hey, do they have everything there? But then also it helps the students check and make sure that they're completing all parts of the assignment as well.
Yeah, faster for the teacher, more effective for the student. That seems like a win-win.
It is.
All right. So I want to jump in now to my third big takeaway from the book, which was this idea of starting very small with writing assignments. I was really intrigued by this. You sometimes start with a 3-sentence writing assignment, and that is something I had never really considered before. You start at 3 sentences, you move to a paragraph, you do a paragraph before you assign a longer writing before you assign a paper, even with quite older students. So talk to us about this and how it's helpful at every age.
Yeah, definitely. So I think I started this back in like 2016 or so when I noticed that some of the students had all the skills. And it's kind of like how you have your students. You've got your high flyers, you've got your middle of the road students, and then you've got your students who are struggling. And I noticed that if I didn't pick up my students who were struggling, if I didn't provide some kind of remediation to get all of my students kind of on the same playing field. All of the writing instruction didn't really help the students that well. And
Mhm.
so by looking at what you need for an essay and a good essay, I've narrowed it down to 3 basic sentences. And even at the 10th grade level, at the beginning of the year, I'll assign that 3 sentence writing prompt for about the first month or so. And I think one of the biggest benefits is that it's so accessible to students. If you say, hey, we're going to write an essay, immediately they're going to groan. But if you say, hey, I only want 3 sentences from you, they're a lot more willing to do it, and it's not as intimidating for them. And so there's a lot more buy in. But what I don't tell them is that these 3 sentences are actually really, really challenging, because if they can do the skills in these 3 sentences, the essay is no problem. And so the biggest benefit for having these really short in class writing assignments is that I'm able to go around and provide real time feedback to my students. I can read their first sentence and see, do they have it? Do they not have it? If they have it, great. I'm going to put a little check next to it. If they don't have it, I can have a quick conversation with them right there and give them some feedback, and then they can keep working on it. And so when you have larger class sizes, like I have 36 students in my classes,
Mm.
being able to provide that real time in person feedback is really, really helpful. And so the 3 sentences, the first sentence is your topic sentence, which also translates then to a thesis statement. And I teach them that there are a few things that they need to have in this sentence. And it comes down to an acronym, GTAP. So they need to have the G, which is the genre, the T, which is the title of the piece, the A is the author, and then the P stands for purpose. But what that has to be is it has to be the answer to the prompt. So they have to make sure that they are answering the writing prompt in that topic sentence. And at first, the students think, oh, hey, this is really simple. But then they start to struggle with the purpose part.
Yeah.
And so just making sure that they have the full purpose, the full answer to the prompt in there, uh, that kind of catches students off guard. But if they can do that, they can write an essay and stay on topic. And then the second sentence is that evidence sentence. And this is probably one of the more challenging sentences for students, where, like I said, they have to have the transition to let us know we're going into evidence, the context, the speaker, the quote, and the citation. And then the third sentence is the evidence and commentary sentence. And again, when they're starting to learn about embedding evidence in their writing, they learn just to say, this shows, which is great for the younger students. But at a high school level, I want to know, what is this? And so I'll give them some sentence structure or starters to talk about what specifically is the this that you're talking about. Is it the author's use of language? Is it the metaphor that adds more detail? Like, what is the this that you're referring to? And
Mhm.
so those 3 sentences they'll write, and I'll give a little bit of instruction for one sentence, and they'll write, and I'll go around. And after about 10 minutes, I'll give a little bit more instruction for sentence 2, give them time to write, and I'll walk around. And then a little bit more instruction for sentence 3, give them time to write. And then by that time, the class period is over, and I've almost gotten my steps in for the entire day in one class.
Gosh, I can really see how those 3 sentences are the nut of formal analysis. Like, if they can do those quite complicated 3 sentences, then they're going to build a lot of confidence for a longer paper.
Yes, definitely. And then after like maybe 75% of my students have those 3 sentences, I'll add a fourth where they add an extra layer of analysis, maybe tying the quote not only to the topic sentence, but maybe also to the theme or to like general society.
Mm.
And then that also helps when they're moving on to longer writing compositions. But those three sentences, if students can master those, the paragraph and the essay, it's really just repeating those skills over and over again. So, why are we going to grade an entire essay when the student's going to make the same exact mistake 15 times throughout that entire essay? When we can
Right.
just grade three sentences and really focus on the essential skills that they'll need.
Yeah. Yeah, I find myself thinking about universal design for learning and how sometimes when you scaffold something to be really helpful to kids who might struggle with a certain thing or look at a certain thing differently, it can end up helping everybody. Do you find that your students across the levels in your classroom actually sort of look on this structure with some relief?
Oh my gosh, yes, they do. Even the students who are like naturally gifted with writing, they benefit from this explicit type of instruction because they learn new ways to formulate their ideas organically in an academic setting. But then also, they can work with collaboratively with their peers because their peers are now on the same level with them.
Hmm.
And I found that it benefits all of the students because each student is going to take away a different part of the lesson. For the students who are more of the high flying students, they might take the sentence frames or the sentence structures and add their own twist to it, but they're still following that same format. They're just expanding what they can do. And then the kids who are struggling, they have their ideas and what they want to say, but now they can actually put them on paper. So it really just helps the overall flow and pace of the class as well.
Yeah. Do you find that you want to sprinkle in some words about like, this is a strong place to start. This is a really fundamental, important place to start. Your writing will deviate from this over time. Like you will start to take on new structures as you become a more prolific writer? Or how do you kind of make space for the fact that they won't necessarily have this exact sentence structure for their whole academic writing life? Or does that just come later in the year?
That's something that definitely does come later in the year. But I encourage students, like, you don't have to use this if you want to say things in your own way. Please, by all means, do. And many times they'll try to, and they'll want me to check on it. And I'm like, yeah, that is fantastic. That's great. Um, and so some students will use them. Some students won't need to use them. But yeah, the ultimate goal is that they just write this way organically without any of these structures, but they have to have practice with the
Yeah.
structure to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Very helpful. I wanted to zoom out a little bit at the end to just your overall feelings about your book. It's such a big thing to write a book. And I wanted to know what was the most meaningful for you after many years in the classroom to share with the world in your book.
Writing a book has always been a bucket list item for me, something like an ultimate goal that I've always wanted to do. And throughout the book writing process, and also in talking with my publisher and the editors, they wanted some stories about like who am I and what's my experience with writing. And the most meaningful part was thinking about, I'm going to say, myself as a child and how I've always loved writing, but how that was fostered and cultivated by some amazing English teachers from elementary school all the way through high school. And so I really thought about a lot of my past teachers who had such an important part in building me up as a writer as I was writing this book. And so it's almost like a full circle kind of moment. And in the book, I talk about when I was student teaching, my master teacher, she's amazing. She knows so much. Like, it's almost intimidating how much knowledge about education she has.
Hmm.
And now, like, I teach across the hall from her. We're at the same school. And I think she was the first person who bought my book and she posted about it on Facebook. And it's just those like little like full circle moments where it's like, student becomes the teacher, but I'm still a student because I'm still, as we all should be, learning to improve our craft.
Yeah. Oh, that's so lovely. I can't believe you get to teach in the same hall with your mentor. That's really cool.
It is really cool. She's just right there across the. Well, it's not really a hall. We're outside, but right there across the hall.
California style hall.
Great, except for when it's rainy.
Yeah. Well, Christina, thank you so much for coming back on. I'm definitely going to be linking your book in the show notes, but where else can folks go to find out more from you?
So there's probably two places that are the best. The first would be my website, thedaringenglishteacher.com. There's lots of blog posts. There's even like a free ELA resource library if you sign up for my emails. And then the second place is Instagram at the Daring English Teacher.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you again so much.
Thank you, Betsy, for having me.
Thanks so much for joining Christina and me today to talk about 3 of her favorite ways to make the writing process clearer for students. Until next time, take care of yourself and stay creative.